Good evening and thank you for joining us tonight. Our big story, the fight over abortion heating up after the practice is essentially banned in Alabama. Abortion was legalized in the U.S. by the Supreme Court back in 1973 in the landmark case Roe v. Wade.
And in today's 12 News Bullhorn, we want to know if you think the U.S. Supreme Court will overturn that case. You can go to 12news.com/bullhorn and take part in our live interactive poll. Right now, here are the fast facts that we know about the two laws passed against abortion in the recent weeks. First, in Alabama, State Governor Kay Ivey signed the most restrictive abortion ban in the country into law today. The bill makes performing an abortion a felony at any stage of pregnancy with almost no exceptions, not even in rape or incest.
Ivey tweeted that the bill is a, quote, powerful testament to Alabamians' deeply held belief that every life is precious. Meanwhile, in Georgia, Governor Brian Kemp signed what is being called the heartbeat bill last week. That bill bans abortions in Georgia as soon as a fetal heartbeat is detected, which is commonly at 6 weeks, before many women even know that they're pregnant.
It makes exceptions for rape and incest, allowing for abortions up to 20 weeks in those cases, but requires women to file a police report in those cases. But what is the case here in Arizona? Are lawmakers considering an abortion ban?
Team 12's Bram Resnick dug deeper into the case and joins us live now in Studio 12A. Bram?
Kathy Herod is the architect of more than a dozen anti-abortion laws in Arizona, and Herod tells me she's put new laws on hold this year. But the race is on to strike down Roe v. Wade, and if that happened, Arizona could move fast to outlaw abortion. Arizona Republicans marking National Sanctity of Human Life Day.
House Bill 314 passes.
The day after their Alabama counterparts banned abortion.
This has never been about protecting life. It is about government intruding in the personal choices of women.
Democratic Representative Athena Salmon claiming the Alabama law goes too far. Kathy Herod, Arizona's leading abortion foe, says the new law reflects where the country is at.
Support in the country is growing that abortion should not be legal in all circumstances.
Alabama's anti-abortion law now joins the race to be the U.S. Supreme Court case that could overturn Roe v. Wade, the 46-year-old ruling that protects a woman's right to an abortion. If Roe were tossed out, Arizona could move quickly to ban abortion. According to the Guttmacher Institute, 6 states have so-called trigger laws that would automatically ban abortion if Roe v. Wade were overturned. 9 other states, including Arizona, still have pre-Roe abortion bans on the books that aren't enforced, but could be if Roe is tossed out. But 10 states have enacted laws to protect abortion rights, including Arizona neighbors California and Nevada. Kathy Herod isn't sure what the court might do, but she's paused her annual push for new limits on abortion.
Arizona has made such significant strides on pro-life legislation that the next step would be very significant.
But Athena Salmon issued this warning against striking down Roe.
If they overturn that thing, every single elected official will have to answer to women throughout this entire country.
Now, even though Kathy Herod says she's taken a pause on new anti-abortion legislation this session, when I pressed her on whether she'll move an abortion-related bill during these final days of the session, her answer was, you never know, stay tuned. Let's send it back to you.
All right, Bram.